Illicit trade in tobacco has been called a societal issue. This is from a news article from the TTMA, that is the Trinidad and Tobago Manufacturing Association. So we have Franka Costelloe, the TTMA president. We have the director of premium beverages at AS Bryden, Nicholas Hospedales. We also have Laurent Meffre, Managing Director of the West Indian Tobacco Company Limited. We say good evening to the three of you. But Franka, gentlemen, don't be upset if I say ladies first. But Franka, in your opinion, give me a definition for illicit trade. Thank you.
Definition for illicit trade. Well, illicit trade can be defined by different factors. However, it is best known as tax evasion, products that are brought in illegally to the country that do not pass regulation, are mislabeled, and not brought through the correct channels to be able to declare taxes and import duties and so on. And unregulated goods would be the best way to define illicit products.
So, moving from that overall or umbrella, that overarching definition, Laura, what kind of experience have you had specifically? Because the news article was talking about illicit trade in tobacco. So what kind of impact have you been seeing specifically with regard to your sector?
Okay, for the tobacco industry globally, I mean, it's quite a big issue. It's an issue that is estimated to cost about $40 billion in tax collection for governments across the world, and representing probably around 11% of the global tobacco consumption. So it's a massive issue, and we have identified a number of examples that ranges, from obviously tax evasion, but creating massive issues all the way to organized crime, even terrorist group. When I was working in West Africa, before coming to Trinidad, in countries like Mali, there was clearly links identified between illicit trade of tobacco and terrorism. So it's a very, very serious issue, and that's why, as Franka described it very well, we call it a societal issue because it affects the whole society.
Now, Nicholas, growing up, I know about babash, or as people would say in America, moonshine. What are some of the specific issues we see with regard to illicit products or illicit alcohol, specifically in Trinidad and Tobago?
So overall, DK, you might make reference to the babash, but babash really isn't the predominant issue in terms of illicit trade in alcohol in Trinidad. In 2014, Euromonitor came to Trinidad and conducted an independent study, and they found that 98% of the illicit trade in alcohol was really in contraband, stuff that's passing through our borders and evading taxes. And they did a very in-depth study and quite scientific methods, and it's quite staggering the magnitude of the actual problem that we have, and that was in 2014.
And it's being illustrated time and time again how porous our borders can be, the potential for our borders. Franka, what kind of reports or research has gone? What kind of figures can you give us with regard to manufacturing or products in general? Because we asked about tobacco, we asked about alcohol. Fill us in on the rest if you can, thanks.
So we know that how billions of dollars of food, beverage, and pharmaceuticals are passing through the borders with illicit, in regards to illicit trade, and the government has stated that they estimated a $12 to $15 billion tax gap as a result of the illicit trade. The illicit trade is not just specific, obviously, to the tobacco and the alcohol. It goes to any product that is mislabeled or brought in, again, through loopholes in the borders. Holes in the borders and exceptions other than the lawful way of transferring goods into the country. So it can be from wildlife. We see a lot of wildlife that is coming through the borders as well. We saw recently in some articles in the newspaper in April and even in August where parrots and monkeys and so on were smuggled and unfortunately died in the transfer. We see detergents that are sold a lot on the side of the highway as well. These products are contraband, or they're brought in illegally, or they do not pass regulation, or they're sold from companies that are not paying tax on them as well, those are considered illicit trade products as well.
Nicholas, do you think enough people know about these kind of figures? Because you say, okay, DK is not just Babash, we have so many other things. And there's this study that was done in 2014. But what is done to, or what can be done to highlight these sorts of things so that, as opposed to say, people saying, okay, well, I'm getting a good price on the side of the highway, like Franka was just talking about, saying, okay, well, no, I want to do the right thing, so I am empowered to, but I have the knowledge to do that.
Yeah, so we've actually been fortunate enough to be working with people like the TTMA, Trinidad and Tobago Beverage Alcohol Alliance, on really edifying the public, the population. So we've seen a heightening of the media exposure to it, and we're really grateful to get a little bit of airtime, as in this case. But it goes deeper than that. You know, I think there's things that people can do to identify what is genuine, what is not, and it applies not just to alcohol, but across the board. I think Laurent probably will see some of the could probably comment most dramatically on this in some of the infiltration of the products and penetration right down through the market that he would be seeing in the tobacco industry.
And actually, I'll take that up with you, please, Laurent, because I was speaking to the person you have at Whitco who has responsibility for external affairs, and they said that there were some studies done. And illicit tobacco, apparently, they have more things than they're supposed to, and sometimes some of those things that we don't necessarily want to in terms of animal droppings and other things. Speak to that for me, thanks.
Yeah, absolutely, DK. I mean, first of all, you know, in terms of the brands, you know, we've got, at the moment, we're counting up to 20 brands that are reaching our shores and that illicit product. My definition of illicit goes even beyond the fact of duty evasion. It's also, you know, lack of adherence to labeling and packaging regulation. We're actually very well regulated in Trinidad. I have to say the legislator has done a very precise descriptions of what falls, you know, under regulations. And despite that, you know, we're seeing all these brands reaching our shores. And the COVID-19 situation, to be honest, has accelerated this. You know, when the factory was shut down for 6 weeks, we witnessed right after this a surge in illicit trade, and we believe now we are reaching very fast 10% of the total market. Now, 10% is a bit of a dangerous number because this is what we would call a critical mass number. And we've got countries in the Caribbean, and I will name Barbados, which is estimated to have 40% illicit, and Suriname, 77% illicit. This creates an environment that is totally unsustainable, and obviously it creates an environment of unfair competition and lack of revenue for the authorities and so on. So this is a very serious issue, and that's why we are being very active in engaging, and thank you again for hosting us today. Because we are very concerned about the levels we are reaching now, 10%, and that was probably 3 times less 3-4 years ago.
And it is definitely our pleasure to be able to have this discussion. We continue discussion after this short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. We are speaking with Franka Costelloe, Laurent Meffre, and Nicholas Hospedales of the TTMA, AS Bryden and Whitco respectively, and we're talking about illicit trade. Now, Nicholas spoke about having AS Bryden being able to have dialogue with the TTMA, and that brings me to you, Franka, in terms of before we look at government. I know we had the opening of the 12th Parliament recently, but before we get to saying, okay, well, this is government's role, what can businesses do in terms of partnering, dialoguing, working together to combat illicit trade?
Because as much support as we can get in combating this is needed. This is not secluded to just the tobacco and alcohol industry at all, and we see a lot of other companies are being affected by it. Again, it is any product that is being brought in under the radar or through the borders illegally. So supporting the TTMA would mean speaking out, reporting issues that you're seeing, financial support, data and information, participating in education forums, participating in the training sessions that we're having as well, so that you can identify illicit products. and becoming educated on the effects, the societal effects that illicit trade has. This is a very deep-rooted issue, and it must be understood that it is robbing the country of opportunity in so many ways, not just in the tax collection for the government, which then supports all of the institutions such as the schools and the health centers and the roads and all of that, but it's also robbing the country of opportunity for SMEs and entrepreneurs to grow in different categories because it's stealing market share from legit business players. That also then reduces employment opportunity for the country. Illicit trade is simply a selfish form of theft in business, and it should absolutely not be supported. And what I would say to the consumers is that your role is as critical as the person bringing in the illegal products, and that is because if there is no demand, there will be no supply. So it is as supported by those who are buying it. Everybody has a responsibility and a duty to make sure that we are on the right side of the fence. And when it comes to illicit trade, we have a duty as consumers to ensure that we are buying a legal product. And if we know that it's not, or we suspect that it's not, don't. Just don't. It's not supporting a healthy business. We have to remember as well that the same holes in the borders that these products are coming through, tobacco, alcohol, detergents, and so on, that is also where the bigger trade, illegal trades are coming through, which is guns, the drugs, and the human trafficking and the wildlife trafficking as well. So by simply buying an illegal pack of cigarettes or an illegal bottle of alcohol, you are supporting all of those other trades by deepening the illicit trade market.
And this makes me want to open the floor and ask about things such as intellectual property issues. Because sometimes we think it's this, but it's a little off. There's a letter changed, or I remember there was a perfume called Escape, and I saw our version of, and it was called Escapade. What kind of copyright or property, intellectual property issues arise with some of these illicit trade items?
Well, immediately that would be classed as a contraband product because it's illegally labeled, and as you're saying, it's misrepresenting what it's to the consumer. Or what we call a knockoff is illicit trade. It's a contraband product. But it should not be on the shelf. Period.
All right, no.
I think one of those that's quite common, DK, in Trinidad is you hear somebody going into a liquor store or whatever, and they lift a bottle of Johnny Walker and they say, no, I want the one with the marble in it. And what the marble really is a non-refillable seal, so that you're guaranteed that what you're getting inside there is Johnny Walker, is black and white, etc. It's a genuine product. And people have to be aware of these differences, and they're subtle, they're very subtle, and they're designed that way because they make it very difficult. The counterfeiters are unreal in how really sophisticated they can be.
Well, you have me opening my eyes and say, oh, well, I need to ask for the marble now too. Not that I'm the biggest fan all the time, but do you think there are more stringent measures that are needed to be put in place, possibly punitive measures, Nicholas?
Well, I certainly think so. I would support that wholeheartedly. Now, we've seen in the past instances, people being held with contraband, and obviously without naming names or brands or anything like that. These people got a fine and were back in business within a week. And this is unreal and unacceptable. So our legislation doesn't provide for any custodial type sentencing. So it's just a fine. But these guys, let's put it this way, the taxation on a container of spirits, let's say 40% spirit alcohol coming from outside of the region is $1 million, plus or minus, right? Give or take, depending on how many cases in the container. But that, when you're smuggling that container in, that's your profit margin that you're playing with. And then it's a high stakes game, and it becomes very enticing and exciting for the smuggler. It's a huge opportunity, and that's what you're up against.
Now, looking at this and contrasting it with, or putting it in the context of global moderns, Laurent, What are some of your thoughts in terms of how authorities can tackle an issue like this?
Okay. I think in the context very specifically of tobacco in Trinidad, as I said, I think the laws are very specific, and I think the number one priority now is to continue not just talking about it, but actually moving on to a very strict implementation phase. Actually, people who are dealing in tobacco are exposed. There are some provisions in the Tobacco Control Act. They're exposing themselves to fines up to 500,000 TT dollars and 12 months in jail. The problem is illicit tobacco is being sold pretty much everywhere in the country every day, and no one has been sentenced to any of this yet. And this is really the phase that now we need to move on. It's a call for action, moving from implementation of the law.
I know Nicholas just spoke about no custodial sort of sentencing, but Franka, in terms of giving police service, customs a little more teeth, what do you think are some of the things that could be implemented or put in place?
We have an illicit trade desk that we've set up, and we've been working with the TTPS, and they've been a great support and making a lot of headway on some of the cases recently. But again, they need some legislation to be reviewed to give them some more teeth. So we're talking about the Food and Drugs Act, the Tobacco Control Act, Customs Act, Standards Act, the Trade Descriptions Act, and the Trademarks Act. All of these need to be revamped to give more power to the TTPS and also to Customs. And lastly, we would call for the formal creation of an illicit trade desk that would put emphasis on counterfeiting and smuggling and tax evasion to give more resources to the unit so that they could have a real focus and have effect. But I think everybody has expressed it. You know, you have to put the fear of breaking that law. The consequence has to be greater than the risk. So we have to improve that to really counter it.
I know we have about a minute left, and I'll ask you, Nicholas, and let's kind of go around. Do you think it will be easier to try to tackle this as a nation, as a country, or do you think a regional approach may be a little more effective?
Yeah, well, definitely I would support the regional approach. We know, and I think WITCO has done a lot of work on this regionally as well, or BAT, I should say. And we know the movement of the products, we can see it. And I know some of the containers that have been seized, they come in throughout, they have stopped within the region. Sometimes they've emerged directly out of the region. And if we do adopt a regional approach, there will be a much higher level of seizure and, you know, some sort of impact. People are not going to continue to bring it if every container they bring is held at the port. And through collaboration and sharing of information, we'll hit that bullseye much more easily.
All right, I give you the last word, Franka.
Sorry, what's that?
I give you the last word. We are just out of time, but I give you the last word to close this conversation.
Please get involved with the fight against illicit trade. Definitely do not support by being a consumer of illicit products. Learn what an illicit product is by attending the training seminars. We have our Trade and Investment Conference coming up in the last week of October, where you can see what our genuine products are in Trinidad, or legal products are in Trinidad, locally manufactured. And you can also attend some of the training programs there. You can get involved by supporting a lot of the initiatives that we're working through with TTPS as well. And
definitely, this is a conversation that we will want to continue with you, because this is not something that 20 minutes can really encapsulate. But we want to thank you so much, Franka Costelloe, Laurent Meffre, and Nicholas Hospedales for joining us. And we want to thank you on behalf of the entire news team for tuning in. I'm DK Rosta. Good night.